Hello and welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. I'm Kevin Castley. Thanks for being here tonight. Tonight, we are going to be covering the second day of intense protests in Belarus and specifically in Minsk. I've got a few videos lined up for you tonight from the actual scene on the ground in and around Minsk. This is in many ways unprecedented. We're talking about a dictatorship, which is, the dictatorship of Lukashenko, which has ruled Belarus now for 26 years. But I've got on the screen right now the banner of the pro-independence movement, the pro-democracy movement in Belarus. Belarus has never had a democracy. Belarus, before the dictatorship of Lukashenko, they essentially Nazbol-like dictatorship of Alexander Lukashenko, very nostalgic for communism, literally retains the actual name, the KGB, for the secret police. I mean, Russia changed their names, which is, I mean, we can have a debate about. I don't really like that. I can at least appreciate the honesty of Lukashenko being like, yeah, this is still the Soviet Union, basically. Why should we change the name of the KGB? So, not a democracy, never had a democracy. Prior to the 26 years of this sort of neo-Sovietism, they were, of course, subject to the Soviet Union for almost a century. But, they had a brief break, in about the first third of it when, they were occupied by the Nazis. And then before that, of course, they were part of the empire of the Tsars. So they've never had a democracy here. So it is unprecedented to see this kind of movement, this upswell of pro-democratic support by the people, because for you to simply express the sympathies for democracy, the idea that the people should actually have a say in their government, that alone is enough to get you disappeared in the middle of the night by the KGB in Belarus. And yet, we're about to see, you got thousands of people taking to the streets in the wake of this absolutely phony, bogus election in which Alexander Lukashenko has claimed just under 80% of the vote. Yeah, right. BS. It's like Assad claimed, like 90-something percent? Kim claims 100%. It's like, yeah, it's not a fair vote. All of the male opposition candidates were arrested in the run-up to it. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who's the opposition candidate, the only one that was really allowed to run, she had to go into hiding for a while. Now, I saw tweets indicating that people had heard from her that she's actually being all right. She just had to go, off the grid as a result of the turmoil that's happened, because, of course, the KGB not too happy with her. I mean, this is the sort of situation that I wish we had Western resolve on. I wish we had political will in Western capitals. It's not enough to simply say, oh, I'm concerned. I'm concerned, bro. Like that meme that Timothy Spin made of the European Union leaders gathering around and learning that, oh, look at that. China, communist China has cracked down on Hong Kong and enforced communism on Hong Kong. What are we going to do? Okay, let's put out a strong, forceful statement saying we're concerned. We're concerned, bro. We're strongly concerned. Concern intensifies. It's like, no. You need the actual threat, at least the threat of intervention. You need to let Putin and obviously Lukashenko know, the game's up. We're drawing a line here. There has to be a line drawn, because if we say, oh, well, democracy doesn't matter here, well, then why does it matter anywhere? I mean, and of course, you can make that argument about Russia and communist China, but of course, those countries have nukes, so it makes it more complicated. Belarus has no nukes. It would be very easy to get this to happen without even requiring a war of any sort. All that you need to say is to Putin, hey, look, if you get involved, if you intervene in Belarus, not going to work out well for you. Take on a more Brinksman-like approach. People use the term Brinksman as a negative. I never thought of brinksmanship as a negative. I always thought of it as an effective way to essentially call the bluff of your opponent and in order to forge the world more into your image. I mean, that's exactly how the Cuban Missile Crisis went down. Kennedy had, he was able to have the political will to call Khrushchev's bluff. Unfortunately, his administration didn't really have the political will to make the Bay of Pigs work out properly. That was a shit show. But in the Cuban Missile Crisis, it at least shows you how all it takes is willpower and to not back down, and you can really change the world. Because what's your opponent going to do? They don't want to die, so they have to bow down. They have to back off. And so in this case, Putin doesn't care about ideology. He doesn't care about anything. He just cares about his mansion, his Swiss bank accounts, his swag yacht, his swag Benz. That's it. So he's not going to risk all of that over Belarus. You just call his bluff. Obama was too feeble, too feckless, too meek and weak, too bunk and junk to call Putin out on his bluff, because Russia is a very weak state at the end of the day. The only thing that they have going for them are an outrageous number of outdated nuclear weapons, which, terrifies people. Ooh, nukes bad, nukes scary, spooky nukies, right? Like we got the meme for that, right? It's like, they got nukes, we have to do whatever they say. It's like, no, I've said it before. I would literally rather die in a nuclear war than live as a slave to Russia. But it wouldn't come to that because they don't have they at the end of the day know that they're too weak to actually start that. They won't do it. They won't fire first. So, this is the sort of situation that when it comes to Belarus, I just wish that we had leaders. I wish we had a leader of the free world that would say, you know what? We're going to draw a line here. We're going to draw a line, because I'm going to bring up a tweet before we get into the footage from the ground on Belarus. In the Belarusian capital, I wanted to bring up a tweet here. I'm just going to see if I can find it still. It's actually from, somebody I've had some disagreements with in the past, and we agree to disagree on a ton of stuff, but there's a tweet by Dylan Meisner, and Meisner was basically saying, with respect to the situation in Belarus, that I'm going to see if I can get this tweet up. But, he tweets a lot. I tweet a lot. So see if I can find it, because I just thought of this. It was actually a good tweet. And we do have Anthony Roberto in the studio. So we'll bring on Anthony in a moment. I just want to get this tweet quickly, because what he said was essentially he doesn't think that there would be much of a civil war in Belarus. Yeah, so this is it right here. I'm just going to, get a screenshot of the tweet here, put it on the screen so that you can all read it. I said to him, I'm like, yeah, I agree. I thought that this was a really good take. I thought that this was a really important sort of warning, if you will. And we're going to take a look at it. I worry that this is going to be far more prescient than a lot of people might think initially. So we're going to bring this up, and then we'll bring Anthony on in a couple minutes. So he's just backstage right now. We'll get this uploaded here, and we'll bring on Anthony, and then we'll take a look at a few videos from the ground in Minsk, in Belarus. So this was the tweet from Dylan Meisner. He said, "It won't be a civil war. The police would just switch sides." That's exactly it. I mean, this is the sort of thing that happens once you have a critical mass of demonstrators. The police, the KGB, a lot of these people, yes, a lot of them are careerists. A lot of them, they may have some ideological loyalty, but this is a really defunct state, and they're not idiots. And, oftentimes in these regimes, the brightest people, they find themselves in those positions of authority in the security apparatus, right? And so they can read a crowd. They can understand the winds of change, right? And if they feel that, I don't think this is really going to go down too well, they're not going to shoot their own people. They're not going to shoot their neighbors. If the army if the army says, "Oh, Lukashenko's lost his mandate to govern," it's over. He's going to go the way of what was his name, Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine, where he brutally cracked down on the Maidan, the Euromaidan in Kiev. But at the end of the day, I mean, you had people on his side, security forces that were like, "I'm done, dude. Like, we're not going to gun down our own people anymore." He had to call in mercenaries from basically from Russia, and he had to call upon these thugs. Essentially, he had to literally employ ex criminals, the same way that Stalin did, where he would take murderers, he would take rapists, he would take thieves, and he would take them out of prison and say, "Hey, look, I'm going to offer you an opportunity, bro. You can either stay in prison for your crimes, or you can become a guard of the gulags and terrorize the political prisoners." And of course, that's what happened. So all of the guards in the gulags were basically convicted violent thugs in the Soviet Union, because every country, regardless of ideology, has their violent thugs. It's just in the Soviet Union, those people were made state heroes to terrorize political prisoners, right? So this system here in Belarus is a holdover of the Soviet system. Likewise with Yanukovych's Ukraine. So he ran out of people that he could even recruit. So he had to go to the thugs. He had to go to the bottom of the barrel and say, "Hey, look, I'll pay you to start sniping at the Ukrainian people." And eventually he was able to, blow that. And so he had to Audi 5000 it. He had to get out, dog. And of course he fled to Moscow, where Daddy Vladdy hooked him up with a swaggy mansion. And so I bet that Lukashenko might not be too lucky, though. Lukashenko's probably going to be a little bit more desperate, because unlike Yanukovych, who is a loyal boy, very loyal boy to Daddy Vladdy, Lukashenko and Putin have not always seen eye to eye. I mean, even just in the last year, Putin he's taken them off of the reduced rate on oil. He's taken them off on gas. I mean, Putin and Lukashenko have had their disagreements. They've had their beef. And I don't know if he would be treated as well. I still think that he would be accepted in Russia in terms of his asylum. He probably wouldn't be getting that swaggy mansion, though. He might get the Kim Philby treatment, where it's like, "Oh, you gave us all these nuclear secrets and you betrayed MI5 and everything, and you sold out your country, and you helped us out bigly for 30 years and really helped us out. Here, we'll give you a drab apartment and you're not really allowed to leave. That, like, you're basically under house arrest." Why? Because they were suspicious of him, even though he was a big help. Likewise with Lukashenko, yeah, they probably won't be as suspicious, but they're not going to forget those times that he didn't kiss the ring of Daddy Vladdy. So Yanukovych is going to be treated a lot better than Lukashenko would. Now, that might mean that Lukashenko is going to be a lot more desperate and that he might not leave the country. If that happens and the army switches sides, oh, he's done. He's going to get the Ceausescu treatment. So he either gets, the snub from Daddy Vladdy and doesn't get the Swaggy Palace over in Russia, or he literally gets taken to the back like the Ceausescus. Those are his options going forward here if this really picks up. But we've seen an intense pace with the protests today, which is, again, remarkable considering that this is essentially the Soviet Union. This is Belarus. So with that, we are going to bring on Anthony here. Thanks for waiting, Anthony. How's it going tonight?
It's all right. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm glad to see, despite all the weakness and the laziness and the fecklessness of our leaders in the West, the people of Belarus got a lot of courage, man. So they got political will. So
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense for all this time. I mean, for years and for really the past couple of decades have been really bad. And, you know, the big thing is, right, like, again, with like the COVID and everything, the economy's been on the downturn, and no one has anything else to do. So people are going to go out and protest. And if there is a massive upheaval, hopefully Lukashenko gets sacked.
yeah,
But as always, they're not going to do so well against Russian tanks. So I
yeah.
always hope for the best, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. Going back to this, it's like Dylan Meisner said, Lukashenko will run to Moscow for his life, and either Belarus becomes a free European state or Russia invades. Now, for me, I think that Putin knows this, and he would send in the tanks, like what happened with the Hungarian Spring or the Czech Spring back in the day. And I that's why I say I wish we had leaders that were willing to be more Brinksman-like, to say, hey, look, here's a red line to Putin. You don't get to do that. We saw what you did in 67. We saw what you did, or 68. We saw what you did in 1957 in Hungary. You Russians, you're not going to get to do that again with Belarus, because you know they want to do it. You know that the Kremlin just wants to send in the tanks if this goes south for them. And I'm done. I mean, I know exactly how the Russians are going to behave here. They do the same thing every time. It's, oh, one of our puppet states in our orbit has stepped out of line. Let's send in the tanks. Like, they're tankies, basically, right? So,
well, and I read this morning, I think it was on Reuters, that the Belarusian government just announced that they arrested, I believe, another 35 Wagner guys.
yeah.
I saw that this morning. I don't know where they were from. I didn't read too into it though, but they arrested another 35. So, you know, they're creeping up around. You know, it's like if you got like ants or termites in your house. They're just, you know what I mean? Like, you stomp a couple of them and there's more of them.
Yeah.
Right. So that's just how Putin operates. He likes
that's the thing. He didn't have this in Ukraine. Yanukovych was able to leave after things went south for him because he was always a loyal puppet to Putin. Lukashenko, on the other hand, has Russian agents that are undermining him. Like, I don't think he's really got much of an exit plan here, the same way that Yanukovych did, which means I think that there's the potential for this to get a lot more violent than even the Ukrainian situation. But I think that the light here, that the saving grace to this, is that I don't think that the army is going to be as willing to clamp down on their own people as they were under Yanukovych. I think that people in Belarus have had enough, and we can take a look at some of the videos from today. These are from a few different sources, but it's mostly a few different people on Twitter showing clips from the same news service out of Belarus. So the first one we're going to take a look at gives you kind of a size of the riots, or I should say the protests. So we'll take a look at that. So that's in a country where just a week ago, if you said anything about, critical of the dear leader, you could be disappeared in the night. And now you got thousands of people coming out and open revolt against the dear leader, right? So
yeah, no, absolutely, and we will see what happens. I mean, it's only gotten bigger. Apparently, there's been calls for a mass demonstration among the entire population, I believe within the next couple of days. So we'll see where that goes. But I think when things start to turn for the worse is like if protesters, if they start to get armed or whatever, and they start to like storm like the Capitol building, or like if they storm into like very key strategic locations and stuff like that. Like if things really get out of hand. So if stuff like that starts to happen, then we know things are really going to go south.
Well, yeah, I think that at the end of the day, what I'm worried about is a Russian intervention into Belarus, because I you know, I don't really have much sympathy for Lukashenko. Like, if they want to give him the Ceausescu treatment, I'm okay with that. Same with Gaddafi, same with Assad. It's like if they want to take him out, have a short trial, take him to the back, put a bullet in his head, I'm cool with that. But what I'm worried about is if Russia preempts it and takes over the country to stop the formation of a democracy from taking fruit. That's what I'm worried about. And I just wish that we had leaders that would just draw a red line and say, no, if you do that, it's war, essentially, because then Putin's going to
Right,
back down.
right. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's I mean, the first step is always getting rid of the first dictator. The second one they really can't do much about, but I
Yeah.
mean, at least they can attempt to take back the government. For the people, of course, to bring some kind of at least some kind of liberal democracy, and it really is an unfortunate situation because the thing is, like, it goes south either way, right? Either Lukashenko wins or Putin wins. Like, that's just the reality of it, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, see, that's what sucks. Like I wish that the West would win this. Like if this was back in the Cold War, but we had this kind of power imbalance, like the reason why the Kennedy and why those guys back in the day couldn't do as much was because the Soviets were very powerful and very scary, whereas now Russia's weak as hell, but they are able to get away with anything because even though we have way more military hardware than they do and better tech and everything, and way outnumber them, we're weak. We're just a weak civilization now. We have weak leaders that will not stand up for anybody. We won't even stand up for ourselves, never mind the people of Belarus. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is, again, like, I said this on Twitter. I said this last night and before. So, like, like, everyone who complained about Obama being weak on Crimea, well, guess what? Someone from the other side of the party is now in power, and they haven't done very much. So, if this ends up like another Crimea, you know, again, this is a Republican president. Supposedly, the party that's very anti-Russia, not being very anti-Russia right now. So,
well, Well, I'm down with the Lincoln Project. There are a lot of Republicans, a lot of neocons out there that look at what Trump is doing and say, we've got more in common with the Democrats now than we do with this guy. This guy owes hundreds of millions of dollars to the Russians, and so there are a lot of Republicans. I mean, Colin Powell's come out, Bill Kristol's come out, David Frum come out, George Bush. John Bolton, all these guys aren't going to be voting for Trump. So there are a lot of Republicans that have absolutely had it with Trump. So,
yeah, I mean, I think, like, the biggest thing that's super hypocritical is, like, Trump complained in 2014 that that Obama wasn't tough on Russia, and I think it's funny that, like, 6 years later, that those tweets, woof, they did not age very well. They did
oh,
not.
man. Oh, man. I mean, yeah, Obama at least had harsh words for Putin, but Trump doesn't even have that. And like, in a way, I think that the harsh words can be worse because they give you this false sense of accomplishment. Whereas if the president is like outright sympathetic to the Russians, at least it wakes people up and say, hey, like those guys are actually our enemies. But, in that sense, hopefully there's more of a silver lining to Trump because it means that Obama, or not Obama, but that Biden's just going to absolutely wipe the floor in November. I mean, at this point, yes, Donald Trump has a really high approval rating within his own party, but his own party is shrinking as a result of this. There are a lot of independents that would have leaned Republican that are going to lean Democrat now that were never polled on that. And, we got people like obviously people like Reese, for example, who's like independent and he's supporting Biden. But, he's somebody who would have voted for George Bush, would have voted for John McCain, would have voted for Mitt Romney. He's going with Biden. Bill Kristol worked with Republicans in their administrations. He's voting for Joe Biden. John Bolton's, he served in 3 Republican administrations. He's not voting for Trump.
More like
So
lifelong Democrat.
yeah, lifelong Democrat. That's right. He campaigned for Goldwater when he was 15. Lifelong communist.
It's so funny because, like, I heard Charlie Kirk earlier today. He was talking about, like, Portland and just, like, everything that's going on there, and I'm thinking to myself, like, Charlie Kirk, like, why aren't you talking about Belarus?
Well, I mean, Portland is kind of a spectacle. It is something that deserves some time to discuss. I haven't really talked about it on this channel. I know Henry's talked about it. Henry more focuses on this kind of stuff than I do, but and he's talked about Portland. But imagine talking about Portland over Belarus because Portland, yeah, there's damage, there are clashes with police and everything, but it's nowhere near as big a deal. It's just some basically soy boy, college boy Antifa dudes versus basically, police and then I guess like Proud Boy type people and stuff. But Belarus is actually, there's a clear good and bad side. Like it's black and white. I mean, there are good guys and there are bad guys. I mean, it would be such an easy story to cover. There's not really much
Well,
nuance needed.
well, it's not like Kirk needs to like say something 24/7, but like even just I don't know to acknowledge it or just to like I find it funny that like he puts America first, but he only looks at domestic stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree because a huge point of Turning Point USA, like I've seen a lot of their memes. I agree with some of their memes. Some of their memes are cheesy. It's why I call them cheesy Charlie. They're not really that effective, but some of the messages I agree with. I'm a capitalist and everything. He often talks about how like communism is a great evil and can never be allowed in America. But like the KGB is shooting protesters. They're not shooting, but they've killed at least one person in clashes the with the KGB and with the police over in Belarus, fighting for democracy against basically a communist state, but silence. It's unfortunate. I haven't checked Charlie Kirk's Twitter in a while, but maybe he's just too busy reading through the 250,000 people that he follows. I mean, again, imagine following a small city's worth of people. That's amazing. So,
But
amazing.
but Kevin, he has more followers than you, so
Yeah,
therefore
he's
he's
got more
right.
followers. He's got more followers, but I have a higher ratio than he does. Literally, he's following. He is following right now about 1/7 as many people as he has following. I'm following about an eighth, so I'm actually
Yeah.
doing better than Charlie on that, and he has like 2 million followers. So that's sad. Something's up. Like, or what was it? Like 1.6 or something? I forget, but like something's weird when the dude's got over 1 million followers, but the ratio's like 1/7. You're like, wait, what?
What he did was he did like a follow for follow thing, probably.
Yeah, it's so zoomy. It's like the classic zoomerism. It's like for like, follow for follow. It's like the most vapid, substanceless, cringy, uh, you know, basically circus tier social media management. It's like,
You know what's really funny about Charlie Kirk too? Like he used to be more like a big free market enterprise guy that was like a Mitt Romney dude, and that had like something on foreign policy, but like now he's just like a Trump shell. Like I think that's so funny.
well, yeah, a lot of people said that it's grifting on his behalf. I really don't know. Like, in all honesty, I don't really know to what extent it's grifting because some people just naturally change their mind over time because, for whatever money he's making now, he would have been making money if he was doing libertarian stuff too. So it's like, I don't know how much of it is a grift. I think the Dave Rubin thing is a more clear-cut grift than Charlie Kirk because, Charlie Kirk has always kind of been conservative, but then he moves to a different type of conservatism. I think, I think that can happen naturally, but I don't know. I'm just giving him the benefit of the doubt right now. I don't really pay too much attention to Charlie, so
Oh, well, I mean, I follow him. I follow a lot of the conservatives. I'm not one, but I definitely follow a lot of them. And I just think it's funny that a lot of them don't talk about foreign policy, even though like a lot of them call themselves America first. They're putting America ahead of everybody else. So I just find it ironic to see that, at least to see the slogans.
yeah. No, a lot of those people, they're basically paleocons or isolationists. In other words, to them, America first doesn't mean America is the hegemon in the world calling the shots. It means America as the dude sticking his head in the sand and pretending the rest of the world doesn't exist. It's just
Well,
me, me,
not
me. I
only
can't
that
hear you.
though, but they would look at Belarus and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's actually cool. Like that's swag. Like they
Yeah.
own the libs."
Well, I don't know. I don't know if Charlie, in fairness, I think if
Well,
you ask
well,
Charlie,
not Charlie, but like
because
some of
he
the
hates
other ones.
communists. I think if you told him what Belarus was about, he'd be like, "Oh, that's like the Soviet Union." He
Oh no,
he
no, no,
probably
I'm
wouldn't
not,
be down.
not, I'm not. It's more the further right people than him.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, getting back to Belarus, it's definitely a huge problem. The other thing, of course, is if there's going to be a huge refugee crisis, which again, Poland already hosts a lot of groups and a lot of people in that country, so there would probably be a big influx there. There'd be an influx into Ukraine, into Lithuania, and maybe into Germany as well. And that's going to destabilize things to an extent. Obviously, if things go a lot worse, which it seems to vaguely point into that direction, I can't say for sure, but it seems to go there. Like the protests haven't died down yet. Maybe they'll die down tomorrow. I could be wrong, but it looks like it's getting worse. So with that, of course, Russia is probably looking at their options, what they can do, and so are the surrounding countries. Belarus also did well. The Belarusian government also shut off the internet
Yeah, that's true.
too, so
That's
people have
true.
to use
They did
cellular
shut down
data.
the internet.
Yeah, so then you have to rely on satellite data now. So it's going to be more expensive for people to film. Like especially if you're filming on your phone, you have to rely on data, which is pretty expensive. So we're probably going to be seeing less videos. I mean, we'll still see videos, of course. Because it's not like North Korea. It's not like that. It's not like that totalitarian though, but it's definitely going to be a lot harder to get information out of Belarus, just because they're doing stuff right now to obviously curtail people who are against the government.
Yeah. No, and that's a good point. And I want to go to the next video here. This is of the police cracking down on protesters in Minsk in Belarus.
Да, да, ебашит тачку. Серьезно? Да. Носилки. Что творят?
В смысле, Россия? Россия?
Да, 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 слушай, смотри.
Это
Российские
российские
опознавательные знаки. Охренеть! Возьми, правее, правее, правее.
Что? О, все! Пошли коктейли. Вот вам, ребятки. Вот так-то вот. Сейчас стрелять начнут. Все, зассали? Вот, о, все. Прям людей стреляют. Вот это да.
Yeah, so I meant to show the second clip, but you got to see, of course, the build-up earlier on. See, even like this is a country where even just filming that is something that can get you disappeared by the KGB. So,
Right. What's interesting? I was looking at their helmets. It reminds me of those old Soviet helmets from the late '80s. What they used, I believe, in Afghanistan, or I believe in the early '90s in Chechnya. So it looks like they have a lot of the old Soviet military equipment. I just noticed that on the on those police guys. So I thought that was interesting.
yeah,
There's a
the
lot
whole
of
thing.
Soviet aesthetic to Belarus.
Yeah, the whole thing is a holdover of the Soviet Union. Like they have the KGB still, a lot of their insignia and a lot of their emblems and
The
a lot of
flag.
their aesthetics overall is, of course, not just modeled on the Soviet Union. It basically is the Soviet insignia. So,
Yeah, I mean, I know. I read an article about, I believe, almost a year ago that the one journalist called it the microcosm of like the USSR, like basically by saying that's like the USSR but like a mini version in the 21st century, which I thought that was kind of funny.
What's crazy is that there's actually a country, or not a country, but there's a wannabe country that honestly is probably even more closer to the Soviet Union than Belarus, and that of course would be Transnistria. I haven't really talked about Transnistria much on this channel, but do you know much about Transnistria and Moldova? Because
Um, that split off country. From what I know, there was a war back in the 1990s in which I believe was like the Soviet. I think it was some like airborne or whatever that was there, and some there was like a those military clashes there, and I guess like Russia kind of wanted it split off. I believe because Moldova, they have the same ethnic composition as Romania as far as like the main population goes. But that split off country, I believe a lot of that was mostly in Russia's interest. But that's a war that happened back in the early '90s because what happened was there was a bunch of wars in the Caucasus and in Eastern Europe, and then also in the Central Asia that spurred after the USSR split. Because what happened was like the USSR, when they did it really poorly as far as like I guess quote unquote their own decolonization goes. So when the Soviet Union pulled all their troops out of these countries, like how we've seen in the Karabakh region or in other parts of the Soviet Union, when they pulled their troops out, they didn't really divide things among ethnic lines. Really, they kind of just made arbitrary lines or drew arbitrary borders. Or what they did was like they just didn't really do anything. They just like left it up to the people there to like kind of settle, and it made a lot of different civil wars and frozen conflicts that we see today. I know that's kind of like a symptom of that because the Soviets didn't really care. They just like left the country as it is. Like at least like when the British left a lot of their colonies, at least they weren't like as heartless. But I think there's obviously a lot more to it though. I don't know enough about it. But yeah, I think a lot of it's because Soviet Union.
are you there, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. I thought I lost you for a second, but I was just going to say about Transnistria, though. The thing with them is like they still have the KGB, they have the Lenin statues and everything. They got the Soviet flags and all that. It's about 500,000 people, and they're basically, it's still the Soviet Union. Like they still consider themselves officially part of the Soviet Union, too. But of course, nobody really recognizes them as a country. But it's just, they are a de facto power in Eastern Moldova, and
Yeah.
500,000 people there, 10 million people in Belarus. It's like, yeah, it's a small population, but Russia's 140 million people. I mean, it's not insignificant. I mean, there's about 14, like there are about 14 Russians for every Belarusian, but I mean, the Soviet Union hasn't really completely died yet, and it would be awesome if this could be the end of Lukashenko's hold on power.
Well, the thing is, what's interesting from my geography class I learned was like even within the Russian Federation, there's republics within that country. Like for example, you have like Tatarstan. There's
Yeah.
like there's Caucasus. Well, I'm sorry. Within the Caucasus, there's little republics within there, and again, the Russian Federation is called the Russian Federation because it's like a link. It's like a linkage of like a bunch of like ethnic groups that are like have their own like representation or whatever. They have like their own like governments and quote unquote like autonomous regions that like form as like use as like this united federalist government under Russia. It's really weird. There's like little things like that like throughout Russia and into Central Asia. It's really strange because like they seem to kind of keep like remnants and like fragments of like the old Soviet Union by kind of doing that. But they're just like a lot smaller now, and they're just mostly like kind of larpy in some ways, I think.
Oh, for sure. Like you had that with like South Ossetia and Abkhazia and stuff, where Russia's
Well, you have
basically
like the Donetsk Republic or whatever too.
well, the Donetsk Republic, the Donetsk People's Republic, that one's just straight up Nazbol. I mean, they basically
Yeah,
combine
okay.
their flag is, as far as I understand it, it's like a dark blue version of the Confederate flag of America, basically, plus the Russian stuff. Those guys are Nazbols. Like I've seen the Vice documentaries where they go into that area on Lugansk as well, and they're like extremely conservative, like ultra conservative and super communist. It's just
Is it
it's
Tuck the Cuck land?
yeah, no, it's a kind of stuff where it's like, yeah, you'll get shot if you're gay, that kind of thing. And they're like, you know, they're communists. Like they're Nazbols, you know.
It's basically like Chechnya. Like Chechnya still exists. It's just not
Yep.
an independent country. What Chechnya is, it's like a compromise between the Russian government and Chechnya, in which it's an autonomous republic where women and gays don't have any rights and people are stoned and killed there. It's again heavily left wing economically, but super socially conservative. It's basically like almost like a feudalist society, like the way I've seen some of this stuff. It's just awful. It's like women like are literally stoned over there. It's like, yeah, Putin, the savior of Christianity. I mean, like it's like it's so bullshit.
Oh yeah,
Like,
no,
like,
that
like
line
these, all these, mhm.
that line that like Moscow is the third Rome and Putin is like this born again Christian who's like the savior of Christendom. It's like Russia has a far higher percentage of Muslims living in their borders than Germany or France or any of these other countries in Europe. It's like over 15% of Russia is Muslim, but the alt right loves it. Whereas like in Germany, it's like, few Muslims, it's the end of the world. It's like, come on, man. Like Russia, it sounds like an ethno state that the alt right might be into, but it's not. It's not. You know, there's some ethnic
Right.
Russians, and then there's a ton, as you mentioned. It's a federation of what is it, 86 or 87 oblasts and a ton of autonomous territories. You got like Nenets people, you got Chechens, you got obviously Tatarstan, you got you have the
Some of these
like
are just
there's
and
one
they're
that
so-
there's
and
one
they're-
that's majority Buddhist, for example. I mean, it's the sort of thing. And then of course Islam is a huge presence in Russia too. It's the
right.
sort of thing that the alt right doesn't know jack shit. All that they know are they watch the Red Square rallies with Putin and Shoigu, and they think that it's like trad Orthodox Christianity, and that's the whole thing mixed with communism. And it's like, no, it's really not. There's some communism. There's a
Not
bit of
only that, though, but
Christianity.
like from like videos. Well, I have to look more into it though. But like from like some stuff I watch, especially like from like my geography class, like all these like autonomous republics that are like either aligned with Russia or inside Russia, like these places have like no future. Like these are like really like this looks like 8 Mile from Detroit. Like they're all like destitute places. Nobody looks happy when you interview them. They're all like they're really poor. I mean, I'm not saying these people are bad or anything. I'm just saying like the conditions there aren't really good. Like the way these people romanticize Russia is like absolutely insane. Like there's people, there's mafias, there's gangs everywhere. There's like women that get kidnapped. Nobody has any rights there. People just get shot out of nowhere and people drive off or excuse me, you disappear according to Putin. It's just it's basically
No, you had a heart
basically
attack
like a-
as you were you died because of a heart attack as you were falling off the balcony that the KGB pushed you off of.
Yeah, exactly. You had an accident. You fell off the ladder. Wink, wink. Right?
Yeah, no, more journalists, the higher percentage of journalists per capita, they die in Russia than during the height of the Iraq War, for example, as casualties in the crossfire. It's more dangerous to be a journalist in Russia than in any war zone. So
And apparently, I haven't looked too much into this though, because I was just informed this a couple hours ago, so I have to talk to him about it. But I was told that apparently there is like a really far right, militias or people or like groups within Belarus, kind of like how there was in Ukraine. And apparently there is a really LARPy group, and that's kind of cringe. So you have all this cringe, and you know what's funny too, like all these like all these like Nazgul types or whatever, like as soon as they join the Russian Federation, they'll regret it because they have no future.
Yeah. That's it. All that they have is this pipe dream. It's just emotions. It's just feelsies. It's just this idea of Putin as daddy and everything. And what is Russia? Russia's a bunch of poor people who, have to take drugs and drink a lot of vodka to get over their miserable existence. Russia is in decline, and the only thing that's keeping them any bit relevant on the world stage is that the West is so weak that the West lets them get away with anything and make moves around the world. And they also have 8,000 really poorly maintained and outdated nukes that everybody's terrified of. So
You know
they're
what's
able.
interesting? Because I saw this really left wing woman today who's a journalist. I forgot her name, but earlier this morning I quote tweeted her because she was saying that like, look at Belarus. It's like the perfect socialist state.
Oh,
Everything's run by the government. You might have saw the tweet, but like, I literally quote tweeted that and I put like the clown mask. I literally showed
yes,
the
I did
clown.
see that.
I showed the clown because I thought it was so stupid. Like, really? You really think that's like your perfect socialist utopia? Did you know places in Belarus don't even have elevators?
Yeah.
You just go up the stairs because they can't even afford that?
Yeah, it's like North Korea. It's like, well, actually, my favorite version of an ideal democratic paradise is actually the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. They have democracy in the name. They love democracy.
Yeah. Like, it was so funny because, like, I didn't even know how to respond to it. So I started posting the clown memes because it truly is clown world. Like, these people are clowns. Like that's your future, like a broken Soviet country and living in like freaking what, like apartment buildings that look like cinder blocks.
Basically, yeah. It's like they're all the Khrushchevskas from the 1950s. And it's like the thing about those is those look bleak, those look miserable and everything. But in fairness to that side, back, it is true that some of the people, like the elderly people that actually have fond memories of them, they like those buildings because they had nothing before because of the war and everything. And so they have, memories of their childhood and everything or their teenagehood being there, and they were really happy to get those places. But of course, they became derelict. They were poorly maintained, as all socialist systems are. The same thing happened in the United Kingdom, by the way, with a lot of the public flats and everything that were built, those huge towers in Scotland and England.
Right.
People were happy to get their, these houses. It was a huge improvement in their living standard. And then what happened? They became cesspools of drugs and everything else because when the government produces public housing, it looks great for the first year, but then you're like, it's not really your property, so nobody really takes care of it, and
Right.
everything goes to crap. The same thing happens in China. There's not really much of a communal sense of responsibility or anything because people at the end of the day are selfish. We're individualists, and that's why the government should not be involved in these kinds of areas. But back in the initial days, they did look kind of nice, and through the 50s and 60s, it would have been okay to live in a place like that. And it would have been not competitive with the West, but, definitely an improvement over, what it could have been like if you were in China or North Korea or something. Well, North Korea took the Soviet model. That's not a good example, but, Vietnam or something like that. But then what happens? Oh, the system stagnates. The system goes into decline. Nobody cares to take care of the commons, and the whole thing becomes a degenerate cesspool of
Well, they only
drugs.
fall because of the CIA. That's what you have to remember.
Yeah, it's the CIA. It was the neocon ghouls.
I like, and there's this Nazgul guy. I think you've seen him. He's called Death of the West or Death to
Oh,
Imperialism
that
or
that
whatever.
that has to be
He
a troll account. That is a
he
troll.
he tweeted at me and he was like something along the lines of like me being like a Western degenerate, and then he posted a tweet saying that like Belarus should be annexed by Russia, and I quote tweeted him and I put the clown. I put another clown. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a clown. You're living in clown world, dude. Stop LARPing.
Well, and he's anti-war. He's anti-war. That's why he wants Putin to invade Russia. He's anti-imperialism, or not Russia, Belarus. He's
Yeah, I
anti.
mean it's funny. I mean, like you said, you had people like Ben Norton yesterday
Ugh.
justifying freaking Lukashenko.
Rain.
Like,
Yeah, I call him Bootlicker Ben. Bootlicker Ben. Ben Norton. What a miserable excuse
like
for
the
a.
thing is, like at least because like if you're gonna be like if like at least if you're coming from like a left leaning angle, like if you're gonna like I guess quote unquote defend like a socialist place or a quasi socialist place. Like I think there's like smaller countries like around the world or even like smaller ones like in the Caribbean or whatever that like you can probably stand. You can't stand fucking Lukashenko, dude. I know there's worse people though, of course though, but it's like they always pick the worst people to stand. Like like come on, man. Like at least if you're gonna do a socialist, it would be someone who's at least a little bit better, right?
Yeah, but it triggers the neocons. Apparently, they own the neocons. You know.
Yeah, like I don't know, like I find it so ironic because it's like these people just have like such a thing up their ass, and the biggest thing too is like even some journalists online that I follow, they were even getting sick of these people that kept saying like, oh well, it's the USA, it's the USA, and like these people like there's this Alex guy who's from the region, and he even like quote tweeted this guy and said like, look, dude, I'm actually from this country. The CIA isn't here. Stop posting this garbage. Stop emailing me this garbage. It's not everything's about the United States. I just thought that was so funny.
Oh yeah, no, these people know jack shit. All that they know about people on the ground, it comes from 4chan memes and propaganda. That's it. They are surface level, vapid, contrarian losers who want to stick it to the neocons because they're living in 2003 and they watched the Michael Moore and an Oliver Stone show and they figured out that like Bush and Cheney, oh yeah, let's own them. Let's own them. Let's stand for Lukashenko and Vladimir Putin and Comrade Kim. It's a
Honestly,
joke,
it
dude.
would be really funny. It would be really funny if I found a tweet that unironically had the Iraq War and the Belarusian protests in the same tweet. It would be really funny. Make
Oh
it
yeah, I'm
happen.
sure it exists. I'm sure it exists. It has to exist. People talk about Iraq all the time. They use Iraq as like this go-to of like a failed U.S. intervention, which is so ironic because if you're going to do that, you could say maybe the Bay of Pigs or something. Iraq was a success. It improved the situation both for people on the ground, for minorities in the region, as well as internationally. Iraq, as well as from the democratic process, they actually had free elections when the surge was happening. I mean, this is the sort of thing that Iraq worked. The problem with Iraq was Obama. It was pulling out. It wasn't going in. Imagine thinking that leaving Saddam and Hussein in charge to murder millions of more people was the smart thing to do so that he could start more wars for oil. It's pathetic. So
I
we do need to wrap this up pretty
oh,
soon.
okay.
So I gotta go to bed. I gotta be up pretty early, but I
Sure.
do want to thank you for coming on and everything,
Mhm.
and I'll give you the floor now to kind of give your final thoughts if
Sure.
you got anything on Belarus and stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, I would always tell people, again, like look at actual sources, especially if you go on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Follow people that are from the region. Look through different think tanks. You can follow me. I always retweet people who are from who are from that region, whether it be Belarus or just from Eastern Europe in general, who actually are journalists on the ground. I always, I always, do that as people who are vetted. Um, I'm obviously not an expert myself, but I always, get information that's true and that's factual. The other thing I would always tell people is that like, hey, like if you have like a friend or someone who's a mutual and they're saying this stuff, just just tell them this, right? Like, not everything's the USA, right? Like, sometimes things in foreign policy have nothing to do with the United States. And in this case, in Belarus, it's mostly between Belarus and Russia. This isn't really a place where the United States has like a footing in. So talking about the CIA is just really relevant. And I think it just destroys the discourse around it. And I think what we have to do is obviously stand with them and just make sure that like no one's spreading false information and people are standing by them. And then as always, thanks for having me on, Kevin.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on again, Anthony. Always great to have you here. We appreciate your knowledge and everything, your perspective on the situation. And so thank you to the audience, of course, for being here tonight. We had a lively chat as well. I got to be up pretty early, otherwise I would get to some of the points in the chat. But I'll be here tomorrow, of course. And I'm not sure what we'll talk about. Probably Lebanon, but we'll see. But anyway, I will say on this, it's my hope that we at least can get more political resolve from the West to at least draw some kind of line here, preempting and precluding the possibility of a Russian move to try to consolidate power over Belarus, because I really don't think that Lukashenko is going to be able to last too much longer. I mean, he might be able to hold on for a few months, but at some point, I mean, this is the kind of thing that, I mean, people aren't really, they're scared, I'm sure, to go out in public, but they're doing it anyway. So the force that you have to compel them to stay inside is outweighed by the impetus that they have, by the courage that they have to come out there and stick it to his regime. And I would love to see one of these last vestiges of the Soviet Union absolutely just be extinguished from the earth, and a democratic republic to rise from the ashes. That would be my hope. And so, I just want to see the end of Lukashenko's regime. I want to see Russia lose this little buffer state that they've got, this puppet state. And I would like to see Belarus become a prosperous liberal democracy and join the EU and everything like that. So I think, again, if obviously it's not a lack of courage on the part of the Belarusian people. They're out there risking their lives right now, standing up for democracy. And it's a matter of weakness, the meek and weak demeanor of our leaders. And Donald Trump doesn't have a hawk bone in his body, and the EU is merely concerned. Canada's concerned. Not too much is going to happen from this, from the Western side. And so it, in many ways, leaves the people of Belarus on their own. And that's a dangerous situation to be in, because, of course, as we've talked about, and as Meisner was saying earlier on Twitter, yeah, Putin's got all the incentive then to, get involved before things go in a democratic direction. And I just wish that we had leaders that would prevent that from happening. And so that's my thoughts here. I still think that there's a chance that this can work out positively, organically, without the West. But, it's going to take Putin not intervening, essentially. And so those are kind of my thoughts here and everything. Thanks for Anthony for being here. Thanks to the audience. Thanks to the patrons. And be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet. Check me out over on Twitch. Link is in the description below. And if you'd like to support my channel here and you'd like to help towards the financial viability of what I'm doing, you can check out my Patreon, as well as you can send me a tip to my PayPal, which is also in the description below. And so that's my thoughts there. And I hope everybody has a good night, and best of luck to the people of Belarus. I'll be